Hi, I'm Julian Chender. I'm an organization development and design practitioner and scholar. So I write, I study, and I also do the work. And I like the combination because it keeps my mind sharp and because frankly, I don't think you can do one without the other. I find that it's a distinct muscle to be able to create knowledge and learn from others so that you can do work, and then to do the work with the knowledge you've created from other work and also apply what others are doing elsewhere. The reason I think that's so important is because then the field actually becomes a bit of a community. Some people say there's nothing new under the sun, which from one point of view is absolutely correct in my mind. And from another point of view, we're always applying it to new situations.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me. As I shared with you, I just use this part of my blog to talk about things that are interesting to me. And recently, I've been spending more time talking about people that are interesting to me. And my goal is that people will maybe see you the way that I see you. Some of the writing and scholarship that you do jumped out at me recently, and I said I definitely want to talk to Julian. So I appreciate you making some time to talk with me.
Absolutely, it's an honor.
Recently, you wrote a piece that caught my eye about Kurt Lewin, who most people accept is, one of the early, if not the earliest, scholars in organization development. And I just thought it was brilliant. That was something that I thought was really well done, and you were tying it to what's happening socially as well, but how our role and our field is so relevant not only to business but to society. Anything you can share about that, like why you wrote that piece and what the reaction's been?
So the why is because I care fundamentally. And there's a hard period at the end of that sentence because I have a sort of unwavering, undying connection to this field. There was something undeniably attractive about OD. So trace that to its founder and you find Kurt Lewin. Now, when Kurt Lewin is taught in the master's programs for organization development, it's, hey, here was this guy who, out of the ashes of the Holocaust in Nazi Germany, founded this field. Mm-hmm. Well, when I heard that, I accepted it. It sounded great. It's a very good story. It sits well. It's a good narrative. It's, yeah, good. Not all true, turns out. Mm-hmm. So what I've done is really devote myself to finding out where did this field come from? And it predates World War II by a long shot. The thing with Kurt Lewin is that a lot of what he brought to the field had to do with his Jewish heritage, and specifically his Ashkenazi German Jewish heritage at the time of the emancipation of Jews in Germany. So we're not talking about World War II, we're talking about Enlightenment Europe and the aftermath of Enlightenment Europe. Mm-hmm. And that all of a sudden puts the field in a different context. So the article you're referring to was in response to a call for articles from the OD Review about what can we do now as OD for the challenges of 2020 and beyond, looking at social unrest, racial disparities, economic disparities, and obviously COVID. And what I wrote about with my co-author Corey Voss was the idea that we can actually learn from others and grow ourselves simply through connection. And I don't think that's anything but obvious to most people in this field. However, it's never been explicitly stated. So I find that the more I write, the more I'm not coming up with particularly new ideas. But I'm saying things in ways that other people haven't said it before. And my hope is that that reaches a new audience, and the audience can carry forward into, deep into this century and beyond. I was talking to Michael Beer a couple of days ago, and he's the first person to write in the OD review, back then the OD practitioner in the 90s, that OD was dying. And my counter is, well, it's not dying, it's actually expanding, but it might not be called organization development anymore. And frankly, does that matter?
Right.
The other side of that is we do have roots as a field that actually many people who do call it OD don't even know. So let's be clear about what those are before it's too late. And that's my work on Kurt Lewin, is to say, where are we really coming from and how did we get to this point? And what are our influences, which I think is much more, the Nazis were a huge influence, but that was in the context of something much larger about German Jewry, about Enlightenment Europe, and frankly about Lewin's experiences in World War One.
We are working in an emergent field. The function of the field is probably more important than the definition of the field. I was initially exposed to it from scholarship. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if I wasn't a graduate student, if I wasn't exposed to Tom Giberson, and he was somebody that was a huge student of Ed Schein and Peter Block. And, if I wasn't exposed to those scholars and practitioners early in my life, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. But I think it's also important to think about, okay, things have changed since I was a graduate student 20 years ago, and they're going to change in the decade ahead. What have you seen happen in the past 10 years that's really changed the field and going forward?
The field didn't start in organizations. It started in social systems. It was looking at human systems based on the group and ultimately really the national level. And that then got applied to organizations. So the idea here is that we have social science and we have management science. Mm-hmm. And organization development is the combination of the two. So with that established, I think where we're going is much more energy around social science broadly in the world, popular books, just the concept of wokeness is fundamentally built on social science and original Lewinian ideas. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Now, how do we apply that to organizations? That's the management science side. Mm-hmm. Management science has to keep up with organization growth, organization change, technological change, all of that. And the social science side doesn't change because humans are humans. And we have been for thousands of years. Our knowledge about ourselves might grow. Our consciousness grows as individuals and as groups. But the fundamental dynamics don't particularly change. So I think those two things combined give us a great opportunity to expand the reach of the field, not from a territorial point of view, but rather from an inclusive point of view, to say, hey, anyone interested in how people interact in basically any form, we're kind of the field for you. This field got applied to businesses because businesses had the money to fund the work. Lewin did not go to commercial organizations for funding for his work initially. He went to universities and nonprofits and philanthropists. Mm-hmm. He went to wealthy Jewish Americans to fund his research. He did think about business. He thought about them organizationally, but it wasn't his initial study. The initial work on democratic and autocratic leadership was Boy Scouts. That's not a business.
You're choosing, or I think you've chosen, at least in the last couple of years, to place a strong emphasis on scholarship and practice in organization design. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to, hear a little bit about why. Why organization design, and why is that I guess, worthy of your time and scholarship over the next few years? And what have you learned that would be, I guess, useful to most practitioners?
My dedication to organization design comes first and foremost out of personal interest. So it's personally fulfilling. It's something that I find stretches my mental and emotional capacity. Uh, and it is also something that makes really, really good sense to me, in that it is environmentally focused. So, not to bring everything back to Lewin, but to bring it back to Lewin, um, his theory that behavior is a function of the person and the environment, if we apply that to organizations and we make the behavior organizational behavior, which is basically how the organization functions, makes money, anything, call it culture, call it whatever you want, how these people make decisions and behave is a function of the person and the environment. Now, person could be team, it could be division, it's entity and environment. Well, who's focusing on the environment? That's organization design. Organization design is about fitting consciously and intentionally the internal environment of an organization with the ever-changing, adapting external environment that it faces, so that it can be aligned. And what I think a lot of organization development practitioners do is focus on behavior first. They go in and say, let's change behavior. Well, behavior is the outcome. It's not the variable.
Mm-hmm.
You can't change behavior. You can change environment and you can change people, but you can't control behavior, because it's an ineffable marriage of person and environment.
What has been the biggest surprise or unexpected learning?
Unexpected, no, but most delightful, I would say, is that it's not about the points of the star, it's about the relationship between them. So many businesses want benchmarks. They want to say, what is the right structure for us? What are our competitors doing? How are they structured? We want to structure the same way. It's like there is no right structure.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be flat. We need to be hierarchical. We need to be circles. Whatever you want. That's not the point. The point is, does it match where you're trying to go strategically?
Mm-hmm.
And does it fit with your people, practices, metrics, and processes? It doesn't do you any good.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be best practice for someone else, but best practice for someone else doesn't mean best practice for you. So what I love is the emphasis on strategy, and that there is really an order of operations in doing org design work, which is discover the strategy that you want to. How are you going to win in the market? What do you need to develop within you, capability wise, within your company, to achieve that strategy? And then let's align the star points to build those capabilities. So that's, I think, the most fundamental learning of the star model, which of course is Galbraith's shining star.
Very well said. Decisions that are not made around strategy make it very difficult to talk about operating models and structure and people. All those flow from strategic choices. Who do you follow, and who do you learn from?
I read what's interesting at the moment, and a lot of that has to do with luck.
Okay.
I don't, someone could have the right article for what I'm working on and want to learn at that moment, and their next piece could be just, completely anathema to who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't have people I stand behind. I have ideas I pursue.
Mm-hmm.
Then the question is, well, who am I reading? What am I working on?
Yeah.
Becomes a different question.
Right.
And the answer there is a lot about identity in organizations. and how organization design is really a question of shifting identity within an organization. And there I'm starting still with Lewin, but bringing things forward to contemporary research on psychological safety.
Mhm.
So bridging many decades of that, still at the very beginning of that research, but that's one thing I'm working on. And the other is an idea around organizational consciousness.
Mhm.
So, well, when we say, Citigroup made a decision to do this, are we saying the CEO decided, the leadership team decided, or the organization decided?
Mm.
And thinking about consciousness as distinct from culture. So you can have a culture that is a manifestation of behavior between the person, team, division, and the environment.
Mhm.
But where is actually the shared mindset and the shared mind period? And that is a really difficult question.
Mhm.
So reading some of the great thinkers of the 90s to the present, like Meg Wheatley, Peter Senge, and Otto Scharmer, thinking about, they all approach the idea of organizational consciousness without naming it,
Mhm.
but they all assume it.
Mm.
And then I'd like to take it a step forward and just say, okay, based on that, what can we pinpoint?